Okay, with the creative team of Beehold, Ben Barry and Book is it Bechtold?
It's Bechtold. Yes.
Bechtold, I got it right. Yes, I'm so happy for myself. So Beehold is the short film that you guys did, and I'm just curious, right off the bat, you guys in your biography, you talked about a new kind of concept, and it's called what DocuPod?
It
Yeah,
is called a
DocuPod.
DocuPod.
What's DocuPod?
Ben, why don't you tell them about it?
Yeah, so I think the DocuPod idea kind of came from me meeting Brooke. We met by her coming to West Virginia from Chicago to do a podcast on a
Okay.
project that I had worked on, and we became friends. And I hadn't really talked to somebody that created podcasts, so we talked about that aspect of it. And then she began to learn more about what we did with documentaries. And it became apparent that, Brooke's connections and Brooke's desire to really tell these awesome stories could be benefited by telling the story from kind of two angles. One, a podcast, more investigative journalism, a deep dive, and then this documentary that kind of lets you be with the subjects, just kind of experience life with these people and give you a visual reference for what they're doing or the story that we're telling. And that's kind of where the DocuPod idea came about, is like, oh, we could do this with these stories and kind of combine both of these storytelling mediums into one. And that's what we did.
And you guys trademarked it,
Yeah,
right? You guys have the trademark for
we did.
DocuPod.
We did. And the interesting thing about DocuPods is that they are both unique pieces of media, of content, but they're better together. That's the way that we see it. The short documentary film is definitely it's experiential, it's immersive, it's gorgeous, and it really sets the stage quite beautifully. And the podcast, as Ben said, gives you a fantastic overview of all of this really important information, a call to action,
Yeah.
and some really good can-do information. But together, they're magic.
So it's like a deep dive in a sense, where like you watch the documentary and then you want to do you want to if you want to learn more, the podcast is a deep dive into the subject, I guess.
Yeah, or it's
Exactly.
choose your own
Exactly.
adventure. I mean, you might come across the podcast first and then
Yeah.
go and find the documentary. So it's really
Gotcha.
a neat, it's kind
Gotcha.
of a way to capture different audiences,
Yeah.
and then give them more opportunity to get to know the subjects if they want it.
Because I see it
Yeah.
happening like with like say I'm giving you an example, like say the show Severance, which
Hmm.
have the show on
Yeah.
Apple, and then the next day Ben Stiller and Adam Scott talk about the show on the
Yeah.
podcast.
Right.
But you need to have to watch the show first to understand the podcast. So that's what I call deep dive. And then they do that with like ESPN documentaries or whatever. Like they have a subject of an athlete, and then they do like this 2 hour long podcast that people are more interested in more. So it's kind of the I guess you're kind of doing in that range, but you like I like the choose your own adventure kind of theory where it doesn't matter where
Yeah.
you start, right?
Yeah. And I think
Doesn't
that's kind of
matter.
what's unique. Right. That's what's unique, is that, both of these stories, we write them and the production teams work in such a way that you can also just experience the piece of content alone. Maybe you just listen to podcasts, so you just listen to
Yeah.
podcasts and you will get information and you will walk away feeling informed. Or the same thing goes for the video part of it, the documentary. So it's neat. They work alone. They work really well together. Like it's really a cool concept.
So Behold
Yeah.
is your
And
first for a way. It's almost a proof of concept in a sense of like what you
it
guys are
it is
doing.
a proof of concept.
Okay.
That's exactly what it is. Yep. Yep.
Are you guys working on something else now right now?
We
Yeah.
are. We are actually working on a docupod. It's in pre-production. We're working on a docupod about a lavender farm in south central West Virginia. It
Okay.
happens to be in one of the poorest countries in the entire nation. And there's this woman started this lavender farm, but it's really special. And there's more to come on this. We're sussing
Yeah,
out
of
all of
course. Yeah.
the good stuff about it, but it's really pretty cool. Our docupods will not just be nature based. I,
That
I
was my
want to just
question
put
right
that
there.
down.
Is it gonna be, yeah. Okay.
While the imagery and the storytelling about nature stuff is so beautiful and it's so much fun, we
Yeah.
tell stories that have to do with many different focus areas, serving many different populations. we look for stories that happen in all the different corners throughout the United States, having to do with many different aspects of humanity and how we do stuff. So there our future DocuPods will run the gamut, which is a lot of fun.
All right, let's talk about Beehold. I guess the pun on bees. Personally, I've always been fascinated by bees because we need them, right, for pollination. And basically, if bees don't exist, humanity is in big trouble, right? So,
Hmm.
but we
One
don't. Nobody
third of
talks about that.
everything,
Yeah,
yeah, a third of everything that we eat is pollinated by
yeah.
bees.
Isn't that
Yeah,
amazing?
Yeah,
it's crazy,
yeah. It,
very crazy. And
And
I
if
think
you
it was
ask the average,
even,
I was
go
just gonna say,
ahead.
if you ask the average person on the street, they hate bees because they don't want to get stung by one, right?
Yep.
Interesting fact, wasps sting, bees don't.
Okay.
And there's this misconception about what's a wasp and what's a bee. Yeah, two totally different creatures. But they look very similar.
So what do
Yeah. And
bees
I
do
think,
then? They don't sting.
Bees, nope, bees pollinate. They're most of the bees that you see are female and they're pollinators. They're worker bees. It's the wasps that do a lot of the stinging. They're very important to our ecosystem.
Okay.
Wasps are for sure. They're the garbage collectors. They do all of that kind of stuff. They're really really important. But bees are pollinators.
Because I was just
yeah.
watching, I think a couple months ago, the Jerry Seinfeld movie, the Bee Movie.
Yeah.
All the pollinators were
Yeah.
men, so it's a sexist movie. You just told me because like saying that they're females.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a lot of misconceptions and like misinformation. I mean, I learned a lot
Yeah.
working with Charlie and kind of digging into this world of like I had no idea also how many different species of bees and pollinators existed. It's a way bigger number even just in the Chicago, Milwaukee area that we filmed in than I would have ever guessed. Like if you had given me a range of numbers, I wouldn't have even gotten close. And so talking with Charlie and doing this deep dive and spending time with this person who is very passionate about the bees and about how they're taken care of and about how we look at them it was very eye-opening.
Okay, so you guys met on a different subject. You guys
Yep.
connected. So what's the origin story of how you guys kind of came about building the website and like were you guys from the same area? Did you guys chat, like kind of like brainstorm how you can work together? I'm just curious about your process.
It's a really fun story. Hum started as a standalone organization. We started as a for profit. We've become a nonprofit.
Okay.
But we wanted to tell a story about a brag it, don't bag it campaign somewhere in the United States. My husband happens to work in West Virginia, and I was talking to him about this, and he goes, "Oh, there's one of those here." And I said, "Oh, can you connect me with the project coordinator?" And he said, "Yeah, sure." So we did, and her name is Rachel Dyer. She lives in Fairmont, West Virginia. This was part of a Leadership West Virginia class, the class of 2018. And so I connected with her. We made a date for me to come to Fairmont to interview her, to do a podcast about this really special campaign. It's called Choose WV. And shortly before the interview, Ray called me and she said, "Hey, can I bring my filmmaker?" Because the interesting thing about this campaign is that they conceptualized it, they wrote it, and then they made a commercial about it. And so she wanted to introduce me to Ben, who's the filmmaker. And of course, I was like, "Yeah, sure, I would love to meet him." And so we all sat together in a conference room and we talked about this project of theirs. And through that, that's how Ben and I met. And it just took off from there. This campaign was really the launching pad for Ben has his own production company. Hum is also a production company, and we're creative partners, and that's how we work.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I think the link was just very natural because Mtn Craft is my production company here based in West Virginia, and like when we met Brooke and just again became friends and started to hear more about Hum, the mission of telling these stories just resonated for us because, as Appalachians, we do a lot of storytelling to kind of change the narrative and kind of like talk about how we see our region because our region gets a bad rap. Even West Virginia itself gets a bad rap.
Yeah.
And so from the start of Mountain Craft, our core values were around storytelling and around, a sense of place. And so a lot of what Brooke was doing with Humm, it just aligned so well. And so we just kept talking and kept scheming and kept, imagining what a partnership could look like. And here we are with DocuPods.
So there's
And my introduction, go ahead.
go
Sorry,
ahead.
go
Sorry.
ahead.
No, go ahead.
My
Sorry.
my introduction to West Virginia was through Rachel and Ben. My husband hadn't worked there for very long. And
Okay.
so I've gotten to know West Virginia. I didn't know it before. And now I really do. And it's a wonderful place. So it's neat to bring Chicago into our conversations and West Virginia into our
Yeah.
conversations and build something where we're both very new to each other's territory.
So it's interesting because Ben is like born and raised, so he has a different perspective of West Virginia, and you're kind of like a transplant. So you guys have both kind of points of view. That's interesting kind of collaboration.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I'll
yeah.
be just
It's
to state I'm
Yeah.
I'm not born and raised, just so that nobody gets mad at me. I
Okay.
am also a transplant. I'm a transplant of 15 years, so I'm becoming
Okay.
more local. But yeah, so I actually was raised in the Midwest, lived in the South a little bit, and then in West Virginia. But your point is still valid. Like I think Brooke and I both bring somewhat of a outsider's
Yeah.
view on some of this stuff, and I do think it's important that that meshes with the people that are from these regions and even the stories that we're telling through Humm and through DocuPods, because you that third party kind of view can change things in a positive way. It can be negative, but for us, we're trying to use it as a positive kind of like fresh look at some of this stuff.
Because well, I
and
know
because
your
of our
age. I don't have to say your age, but you lived in West Virginia longer than you lived somewhere else, right? So
Yes, I did. Yep.
okay, so then that I think when you go over that, when you spend more than 50% somewhere, that means
Right.
that you're a native, I guess.
That's right. Yeah, that's the way I look at it anyway. I'm hopeful they accept me.
Yeah. And just
we
the
we
one,
treat him as a
I was gonna
Yeah.
say one point about the Apple is that you call it Appalachians. Is it Appalachians or Appalachians?
Appalachian is how we say it. I
Appalachians?
mean, there's a lot of different like
Okay.
pronunciations of it, but we say Appalachian. Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to go. So I was listening, I was just one little thing. I was on YouTube, sorry, on Instagram. You know, Instagram has these like lists or whatever like that. And there was a
Yeah.
list of like 15 things you got to see in the United States before you die.
Yeah.
The Appalachian Mountains was not on the list. And that was what
Wow.
before
it
I
should
didn't
be.
even think about this conversation that we're having, but I was like,
Yeah.
could they not have the Appalachian Mountains on the list? It's like it's incredible when you go there. Like
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's an
it
amazing
yeah.
experience.
yeah, and that mountain range also goes all the way to Canada. So I've traveled all the way up to Canada to kind of like toward that end of the Appalachian
Yeah.
range, and it's all beautiful.
So
Yeah.
that my point is that it does have a bad rap.
Yep.
It shouldn't. There's like that kind of like dare I say it like redneck or whatever
hmm Yeah,
that
hillbilly is
Yeah.
is the
kind of
term that's
represent
used. Yeah.
stereotype, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Moonshine, right?
Yep. Yeah, and we want to change all that because,
Yeah,
like, moonshine's great, by the way. And
yeah.
also, that term hillbilly, I was just having this
Hillbilly. Yeah.
conversation with a brand recently. They want to sort of re-envision what a hillbilly is because although most people look at it as derogatory, the term it was kind of like a pioneer or a settler
Yeah.
just in this region. And it's somebody that's resourceful, that's resilient, that's, able to like survive in the wilderness. So like even terms like that people have taken and made into a derogatory thing, it actually started as a very positive, term. So just little things like that we can tell stories about and
Wow.
change the narrative.
There you go. There's a movie right there.
Exactly.
A movie
Right.
that in the podcast, right? So about
Yeah. Yep.
hillbilly. Because it's
Yeah.
interesting
There's
about terms. Like look at woke, right?
Yep.
Woke 20 years ago was this very positive, enhancing term, and now they spin into this negative kind of connotation, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
right. It's unfortunate. Yeah, it
Yeah.
really is. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And the storytelling in West Virginia is it's unbelievable. It's really the people there that I've met are spectacular. The scenery is gorgeous. Like there's so much about it that if people just took the time to go and visit, I think that it would make a huge difference. And that's one of the big things that this Choose campaign is doing is it's trying to pull people into West Virginia to experience it, to be part of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so tell me about the film itself. So you got your subject, the bee, is it they're beekeepers? But he's a kind of a character. And
Yeah.
it seems like all these it seems like they're characters. So where did you find him and how did you approach him about working on making this film?
My dad lives in a senior living community in
Okay.
Milwaukee, right in downtown Milwaukee, that sits on a bluff right over Lake Michigan. And it's gorgeous. It's an urban garden, for lack of a better description. And shortly after dad moved in, I realized I was walking around and there are beehives. There are actual bee boxes on premise. And I asked him, I was like, what's up with this? And he goes, oh yeah, we have a beekeeper who comes and tends to our hives. But because we've got this beautiful bluff, it makes all the sense in the world to bring pollinators in. And I said, oh, I would love to meet him. And so I did. And instantly I was like, A, I need to befriend this guy. And B, I need to know what his story is. And so we did the podcast first of all. And then Ben and I were shortly before the podcast was complete. I think we were at the tail end of production. Ben and I were talking and we were like, you know what, this has to be our proof of concept. And so that's when I introduced Ben to Charlie. So I've known Charlie for what, about 6 years, 7 years, something like that. And so that's how we got to know each other.
And he was
And
you told him,
he was,
I
go
was gonna
ahead.
say, you told him about the project and he was interested in being a part of it.
Yeah, definitely. We broached him with the idea of doing this. He had a lot of questions, which you always appreciate a guy who's anybody who's got a lot of questions before just signing blindly on the dotted line. And yeah, when we spent a week with him, and he was all for it. The list of places that Charlie made that we could visit throughout this week was 30 deep,
Hmm.
35 places around the city of Milwaukee. He was so proud to share all of the work that he does and to introduce us to all of the people who he works with. And then the entire week he spent teaching us all about different kinds of pollinators, different
Mhm.
kinds of bees, different kinds of urban gardening, um, it, and the fruits of all of that labor. One of the really important stories that we included in Behold has to do with the nuns, and that's a very important part of Charlie's story. Is to show the effect of having pollinators in an urban situation. And so
So
he was very interested in that.
this is his business
Mhm. It's a
Yeah. This is
nonprofit.
his.
Behold,
Yeah.
this is
because it's
a
interesting, like
nonprofit.
all the things he did, like in the documentary, like from organizing to like getting into the weeds to like packing things in his truck. Like he's a small business owner. He's like navigating in all these kind of areas, right?
Yeah, for
He is a
sure.
Day to day. It's kind of
yeah,
interesting.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. He has a lot of friends. He has a lot of friends,
Yeah.
and a lot of the beekeepers. It appeared to us that there is this symbiotic relationship with other beekeepers in the area. They all talk and they all share resources and they're all looking for ways to do it better. So
Yeah.
it's not like Charlie's doing it and then Chad's doing it and then somebody else is doing it. No, 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 no. They all work together.
So there's
Yep.
not a capitalistic kind of bee competition going on. It's more like a community.
Yeah.
Not
With
so much.
Charlie,
It's
there's
more.
not.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that was
Mhm.
one of the unique aspects is like, again, an assumption I had made is, people have raised bees to get the honey, like, or even the hobbyists are getting the honey. But for Charlie, it's really about the pollinators themselves and what they provide to humanity and nature. Yes, some of the fruits of the labor, as we mentioned, are that honey, but he's more worried about making sure the bees are comfortable than worried about maximizing, honey harvesting. And that I think plays into that whole idea of his community, which is so it's widespread geographically and by person, and it's so inclusive. And it's such a vibrant community.
So how many days did you follow filming?
I think we
Five.
filmed for 4 or 5 days
Yeah.
in total. Yeah. And they were long, full days following him around. He's very, like I said in the some of the answers about this film, like he is very much like a bee. He is very busy
Yeah.
and very motivated. So yeah, it was fun.
And then you always wanted to be around 20 minutes? Is that was the plan?
Yeah, I think that
The
was
plan
part
has
of the
always
proof
been
of concept.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just like figuring out what does the medium, what does a story tell us and how long does that story take to tell? Like Brooke said, we were always aiming for around 20 minutes. Like the goal is not to make these feature length. But just this that was the point of the proof of concept, is to test that theory and to see, how much can we tell in 20 minutes? Is it enough? Is it not enough? Where do we land? And I think we were pretty happy with where we landed on the timing.
And
the other thing that we want to bring into our docupods is more of a slow TV kind of a concept where we're not going from scene to scene. Like we really want to be able to be with our storyteller. I mean, there's another one. We
another,
always we seem to fall into this bee
yeah.
thing whenever
Yeah.
we're talking about this. But there's a slow aspect. There's an intentional piece to these things. So the opportunity for us to actually walk with Charlie and watch him very slowly maneuver through these bee boxes
Yeah.
was a very special thing, and that's not something that he did just for the camera. That's how he operates, and it was a very nice opportunity to learn about the bees and this community with this kind of this slowed down approach. It was really neat.
In the I guess the I don't know if you're gonna do this with the other films, but it's like a day in the life of a beekeeper.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, and I think that goes back to
Yeah.
the slow aspect that we're trying to capture. Every subject, every story is going to be a little different, but our goal is not to do the typical, documentary talking head thing as much as possible, but to
Mhm.
really, really tell the story visually with hopefully as little on camera talking as possible. If it happens in the scene, that's great. But we really, really want to, like Brooke said, slow it all down and let the viewers just experience kind of like a day in the life. But I think in some aspects, it's going to be a little bit larger than that. But yeah, really, really lean on this slow aspect of storytelling.
Well, those are the
Yeah.
classic. I don't know if you, from a historical standpoint, like those are the classic documentaries of like the 70s.
Right.
They just showed somebody like whatever it was, like it was just they just showed one subject member, you follow them around, and then the subtext was what he was doing, right? So
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of that like fly on the wall kind of,
yeah,
not quite verite, but akin to that, where you're
yeah.
letting the subject tell the story. You're not necessarily trying to manipulate or story tell in traditional methods.
Because well, at
Right.
the same time, people like everybody, you kind of have a loose script, I guess, right? When you're
Hmm.
filming, you kind of have you have to have an idea, thematic of like what you want to tell, right?
Yeah.
We
I
had the
think what,
podcast first of all, and
Okay,
so it gave us that structure that we
okay,
really, you need structure for any kind of project like this. We never want to go into anything just kind of blindly or just kind of like, oh well, we'll see what happens. And having the podcast completely scripted and worked through allowed us to do that, and we will continue to do it that way because it's helpful. It helps us help them tell their story better. This is
right.
yeah. And
Charlie's
there,
story. It's not.
and there was a lot of different aspects we could have gone down storytelling wise with Charlie, but we definitely leaned into the urban beekeeping just because one, that was a term I had not really encountered so much. But just like letting Charlie showcase and describe and walk us through how many different aspects of urban beekeeping can happen and how that could have a huge impact on society rather than the way we think about it again, or the way maybe I think about it, these huge white bee boxes. It's like, oh, get the
Yeah.
population up, but it's more about, many, many different aspects of beekeeping in an urban setting. Some as little as like the little bee boxes. Some of those pollinators are like the size of a pinhead, and he sets up those boxes and tends to
Yep.
those just like your traditional honeybee. So it's like just expanding on that aspect of urban beekeeping. I think that's kind of that was our target as we went forward.
Right.
Gotcha.
Or where he puts his bee boxes.
Yep.
We learned that he puts his bee boxes sometimes on old tree stumps that are
Mm-hmm.
naturally rotting because it gives the bees an opportunity to walk through that mycelial network in order to
Mm-hmm.
get into the hive, which then brings nutrients into the honey. Like there's so many
Yeah.
facets of living
Yeah.
in an urban situation that he thinks about nonstop. And it was
Yeah.
really interesting to learn all of those little nuances from him.
And he's a hard worker. He's always at it, right? So
Yep.
He's
Yeah, I
always
think his
at it.
title of bee evangelist, he talked a lot about spreading the gospel of bees, and like he does it like better than anybody I've ever met.
yeah.
Yeah.
So did he watch the
It
film?
doesn't matter. Say it again.
Did he see the film yet?
Oh, no, many
Yes.
times.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes.
So he
Yep.
approves. He likes what he saw.
Yep.
He loves it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
I think you
Very
guys
much.
made it great. It's a great, like I said, great proof of concept. I'd love to see what you guys do next. So right now you're working on something else, and are you
Yep.
planning on doing like a film a year? Like, do you have like a kind of like a game plan?
You want to talk to that,
We've
Brooke?
got a whole schedule we've got a whole schedule that we are working out right now. We hope to transition to an all DocuPod model.
Okay.
But that is our goal,
Yep.
so that all of our pieces have both the visual and the auditory piece that people can experience, as Ben said, kind of like a choose your own adventure.
Yeah, and fingers crossed, we're going to try to be doing more than one a year. So that's kind of the goal that we're working towards.
Well, we'll link up your
Yes,
website and yeah, so basically humproductions.org and you got the Apple podcast up already and you guys are
Yep.
ready to go.
we
Yep.
are ready to go, and we're so grateful for the opportunity to speak with you today. This was really neat. The
Yeah.
the Chicago Feedback Film Festival has been an unbelievable experience,
Oh, I
and we want to
appreciate
thank
that.
you guys from the bottom of our heart. The feedback aspect, the fact that you guys had people provide us feedback was unbelievable. We've never seen that before, and that was invaluable. And all we could think about, it was interesting after we sat and watched it together in our in our respective states. We all got together and we were like, okay, what's the one word that we've got? And everybody was like, grateful, grateful, grateful. I mean, that feedback was priceless.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for that.
Well, I love to keep in touch. Love to stay to have a relationship with you guys. Love to see what you guys do next and just
Definitely.
keep at it. I know it's a tough grind and this is a great first film. Like I see a lot of documentary films and this is nice. It's a nicely done film
Thank
and
you.
Thank
on many levels. And I like how you talked about like the slow burn, right? Like just
Yeah.
let the visuals tell the story, right?
Yep.
What a
Definitely.
concept.
Yeah.
Thank you. Would
Thank
you
you.
do us a favor and send me an email so that we can stay in touch with you? Because we would love the same.
Of course. All right. I will for sure. Well, we'll send you the podcast when it's done. So you can just link, you can email me back right there. So
Awesome.
I love it.
perfect.
Matt,
Thank
have a
you.
wonderful day.